This video is brought to you by Mubi, a curated streaming service showing exceptional films from around the globe. Get a whole month free at mubi.com/SpikimaMovies. The best way to describe the anxiety that comes from watching Alex Garland's Annihilation is that it's too realistically unrealistic. It offers an accurate depiction of an alien entity, presenting an exotic setting full of unworldly mutated creatures. This keeps the audience from grasping the motivation behind the Shimmer's behavior, if one exists at all, and gives off an eerie vibe of a self-sustaining ecosystem, void of any human influence, a paramount characteristic for an effective cosmic horror film. This peculiarity is certainly enough to put the audience into a trance, but Annihilation goes an extra mile and turns the experience into a trip with its meticulous shot composition. I vividly remember the first time I watched this film and tilting my head in confusion when I saw this shot. No, not because of the refraction everyone keeps talking about, but because of this frame. In photography, compositions like this are called a frame within a frame shot, often used to guide the viewers to the intended subject of the picture, isolating it from its potentially distracting environment. And accordingly, the simple and conspicuous frame in this shot puts clear focus on the two characters, while silencing the rest. It attracts and fixates the audience to the oddness of their interaction, bringing forth the bizarre tone of the film that's been lurking behind the scene. With this newfound awareness, the audience can also discover that Kane is slightly obscured by the frame with only Lena in plain sight. This brings an enigmatic energy to Kane's already darkened image and disconnects the two lovers, helping the composition shine light on the deeper emotional flow of the film. A frame within a frame shot is also known to add depth and layers to the image, enhancing its visual attraction. And although not the best example, it's easy to imagine how aesthetically dull the scene would have been, let alone emotionally, if the frames weren't there. Having said that, a film is obviously not the same as photography, and therefore such composition could easily be the result of an unintended intra-production variables. Except that's not really the case for Annihilation. Even after excluding shots with rather vague and negligible foreground obstacles, there are over 30 shots in this film that make clear use of an internal frame. Among those, 6 are composed of background elements that create an illusion of a frame. These are only relevant when regarded in conjunction with the 18 shots that are multi-framed with foreground elements. Finally, there are roughly 10 other shots that are, structure aside, more about the contrast formed between light and darkness, while also resembling the final layer Lena enters at the lighthouse. This shot type is particularly intriguing because the film's lingering terror really comes from its masterful build-up that explodes in the final act. And the constant use of this exact composition is what guides the audience to unconsciously perceive this escalation.
She's talking about our DNA. She's talking about us.
Now, I'm not trying to undermine the effectiveness of the brilliant visuals the film has to offer. The mutated bear that mimics the screams of its victims is absolutely terrifying, and the recorded footage of the previous soldiers is something I never want to watch again. All I'm saying is that despite these being a big part of what makes Annihilation disturbing, they are only an occasional accent that primarily exists to supplement the said accumulation of lasting fear. This is precisely why the frame within a frame shot is spread across the film, to be revisited periodically, linking the tonally different sequences and suggesting every event merely as a step to get to the finish line, where the pinnacle of mystery resides. Alex Garland himself has stated in the past that one thing he paid special attention to was the quality of off-ness the film builds as the story unfolds. This idea echoes the narrative curve of the film since the characters and their circumstances also end up deviating from their original shape. Lena's crew goes through a process of personal transformation, both in forms of character development and of visible genetic mutation, while the enveloping setting transforms in a more sophisticated manner. The mellow and warm wood tone of a cozy house changes into a cold but vivid tone of the Shimmer. The faintly inserted scores and gentle ambience are replaced with more present and psychedelic notes. And of course, the multi-frame shots become more prominent by adjusting both its contrast and shape to parallel Lena's final destination. Basically, the perceptible anomalies of the film world are being mirrored and carried over to the audience through the less noticeable tricks of cinematography. While the frame within a frame shots collectively guide us to the finale with growing apprehension, it also works on an individualistic level by conveying a sense of surveillance, that the characters on screen are being watched and followed, agitating the audience with its ambiguity. The shadows cast by the frame instinctively suggest that there must be something hidden in the darkness, outside the spotlight produced by the frame. What is chasing the characters? Is it a creature from the shimmer, or could it be the audience themselves? Since the shots are scattered about, the haunting question is never let go and the tension is kept high, psychologically tormenting the audience with their random reappearance.
No, it's been long abandoned, maybe even before.
Like this, even the individualistic quality is best served when in view of the film's entirety, because above all, the way Annihilation accumulates tension is by linking the past with the present. This idea becomes apparent when we take a step back from the shots and observe everything else that surrounds it.
Is that what you want? To go home?
We've briefly gone over how mutation plays a role in this, but the film also subtly incorporates previously shown set designs to communicate this relationship. For instance, the layout of Lena's house is recalled later in the film when the crew stumbles upon an infected house to spend the night in. This creates an emotional connection between the two locations, enriching both worlds with the color they each lack. The cold-blooded conditions of the shimmer are compared and merged with Lena's home, where her longing, sadness, and even happiness reside. Likewise, the recollection of Lena's home is supplied with the heartlessness of the shimmer, turning the previously comforting space into one that cannot be trusted. The convergence implies that the two homes are now indistinguishable in character, signifying a loss of base, a place to return to, for everyone involved, including the audience. A similar approach is shown when the film recycles a lighting setup for the mutated bear scenes. The first time the bear attacks one of the characters, the scene is lit with a flashlight and a lamp with a very low color temperature. Later, when Anya has the other members tied up, we see two light sources that resemble the setup from the first bear scene. Whether we consciously recognize this or not, the lights are there to intimate trouble, as the bear soon returns with its notorious scream and attacks the characters. It's an infamous scene by itself, but the anticipation toward the attack built by the lights is what gives it more impact. In fact, the lighting is almost as significant as the framed composition, since it augments what the shots are doing. Going back to the first example reveals that the contrast between light and darkness was largely what gave this shot an emotional effect. The same thing applies for this shot, where the opposing forces are visually united. After all, the idea of characters entering light from the darkness and vice versa is a direct reflection of the film's story, revolving around the shimmer that engulfs whatever comes its way. If the light is the world Lena comes from, and the darkness everything that is undiscovered, that is, the shimmer, then this juxtaposition is a beautifully relevant trick that reinforces the film's haunting atmosphere. Indeed, there are many references to the darkness, slowly inviting Lena in, not without the lights ironically articulating the dark areas on screen. Commencing its movement with harmless sources like the projector and the ambulance, the blazing light follows the characters and the audience inch by inch, re-entering the frame at roughly the same spot, purposefully overexposed to make its presence known. Before the audience can fully discern its intent, they are greeted with the film's most pivotal moment, where the light collides with the darkness. A big bang, both for the shot and for the narrative. Everything about this moment feels off. The oddly peaceful and bright interior of the lighthouse, juxtaposed with the excessively dark passage, the unsettling video footage of Kane talking to what can only be described as his doppelganger, and finally the humanoid that copies Lena like a twin. An extra suspense is dropped to this already unusual face-off when the humanoid illustrates small imperfections while copying Lena. This makes the humanoid more alien, especially when contrasted with its seemingly flawless presence. However, and as unsettling as the scene may be, the strongest psychological terror of this act is found in the idea of force. That we as the audience also had no choice but to be here with Lena. In fact, the entire last act is constructed to feel as predetermined as possible, a supernatural intervention, if you will, that is bound to feel mysterious and, in this case, uncanny. Notice how the beginning of the final act is predominantly shot in extreme long shots. Most of the preceding scenes mainly used medium or regular long shots to put emphasis on the characters and their subjective experience of the world. Any use of the extreme long shots were mostly for establishing the setting, and even those would quickly close back in on the characters. However, the shot of the beach behaves more like a wide master shot with a much longer duration, helping the space absorb the character and turn itself into a living character. In turn, what is emphasized is the ethereal beauty of the empty beach and the icicle trees, communicating the grandness of the setting while muting the character, spotlighting the divinity of this land and overshadowing Lena's independence with a sense of predestined fate. It's an excellent visual setup to the unknown that is quickly approaching, a far more visceral threat than, say, a directly hazardous creature.
That I needed to know what was inside the lighthouse. That moment's past.
Subsequently, the final encounter with the humanoid also comes off as being inevitable, a culmination of everything that came before. It's designed and placed at the end of the film to function as a revelatory climax that forces the audience to recognize the limitation of the human endeavor and fear the indecipherable cosmos. Evoking such profound realization wouldn't be possible if it only depended on either one of the two tactics. It requires both the setup and the build-up. Therefore, the frame shots could be interpreted as an essential build-up device, inserted to magnify the inexplicable discomfort that, from the start, this was the only available outcome. By distorting itself from an image of a home to an image of the unknown, the shots, along with the sounds, the set, the lights, and the characters, are given the power to command the story and bring the audience to a place of absolute vulnerability. But what if we forget the effects? What if we put aside the psychological tricks and the nuanced techniques that may or may not be felt? Aren't the framed shots then nothing but shots that are framed? Literally. Yes, but this is why everything in the shimmer feels so beautiful, despite the threat they pose. The human plant, the mutated flowers, and even this dead body feels more like a work of art than a site of violence. This beauty is captured and exhibited by the frames in every corner of this world, even when things do not particularly strike the eyes as impressive. It's what frames the darkness as light and light as the darkness. It's what keeps the audience to suspend all disbelief and follow the film to its climax. This moment, the single point of resolution for every tactic the film uses, where fascination and dread coexist in the purest of all forms, is exactly where the frame disappears and the film ends, waking the audience up. Through this frame, Annihilation seems more like a destruction of the viewer's expectations and habits than anything else. Through destruction, it wishes to reconstruct a new perspective on what cinema can be. Could letting go of our rational thinking better our experience with films that wish to present a truly alien concept? Could Annihilation not be about elimination of the self on screen, but of us as an audience? If the loss of our own integrity is what we fear the most, could this darkness not be for anyone but ourselves, inviting us into the shimmer, to be reborn, to survive, and come out the other side of... Hey everyone, thanks for watching my video. I'm a huge fan of films with surreal atmosphere because I believe it's the unsettling, dreamlike quality of this atmosphere that lingers in our minds the most. This is why I also like the works of Yorgos Lanthimos, who is capable of creating an atmosphere in genres that aren't necessarily sci-fi or horror. If you're unfamiliar with his works, Mubi, the sponsor for today's video, actually has a number of his films available in their library if you're in Canada like I am. Mubi is an online curated cinema streaming service that premieres a new film every day, and since every film is hand-picked, it's a great way to watch films you love and discover new films you haven't seen before. For instance, I recently discovered a new short film by Yorgos Lanthimos on Mubi called Mimic. It's an excellent example of a film that constructs a film world that feels timeless and distant to our own. Again, if you're in Canada, Mimic, along with some of his feature-length films, are available for you to watch right now. But even if you're elsewhere, there are tons of other great films in Mubi's library for you to check out, and you can sign up for an extended 30-day free trial with my link today at mubi.com/SpikimaMovies. That's mubi.com/SpikimaMovies. See you there, and thanks for watching.